What happens when the streets take everything from you? Your freedom, your family, your future. When the life you built on the outside no longer has a place for you on the inside. Welcome to Movie Bites, where we bring you the stories that shaped us, moved us, and stayed with us long after the credits rolled. Today, we're revisiting South Central, a film that wasn't just about gang life, but about redemption, fatherhood, and breaking the cycle before it's too late. We'll check in on the actors behind OG Bobby Johnson, Jimmy, Ray Ray, and more, seeing where they are now and how they've changed since bringing this classic to life. Bobby Johnson, played by Glenn Plummer, is the definition of a man caught between two worlds in South Central, 1992. When we meet him, he's knee-deep in the streets, a loyal soldier for the Hoover Deuce gang, willing to do whatever it takes to prove himself. He's young, reckless, and dangerous, but he's also a father. And that's what makes his story so tragic. One bad decision lands him in prison, and while he's locked up, life doesn't pause. His son, Jimmy, is growing up without him, being lured into the same street life that put Bobby behind bars. But prison isn't just a punishment. It's where Bobby finds his second chance. He meets Allie, an older inmate who teaches him about discipline, self-respect, and most importantly, redemption. By the time Bobby gets out, he's not the same man. He's on a mission, not to reclaim his spot in the gang, but to save his son from becoming the next Bobby Johnson. This wasn't just another hood movie. South Central was about breaking the cycle, about fatherhood, about the power of change. And Glenn Plummer didn't just play Bobby, he became him. At 31, he gave one of the most underrated performances of the era, bringing raw emotion and depth to a role that could have easily been one-dimensional. Now 63, Plummer has had a long and steady career, appearing in Speed, 1994, and Menace to Society, 1993, among many other projects. He's one of those actors who never got the mainstream shine he deserved, but has always been respected in the culture. No matter how many roles he takes on, for a lot of people, he'll always be Bobby Johnson. The father who refused to let the streets claim his son. The man who walked away from the gang life, proving that redemption is possible, even in a world that doesn't make it easy. Carol, played by Larita Shelby, was a woman who had dreams, love, and hope. But life in South Central 1992 didn't make things easy. She was Bobby's girl and Jimmy's mother. But when Bobby got locked up, the weight of the world fell on her shoulders. At first, she held on, but as the years passed, the struggles broke her down. When Bobby briefly got out, we saw just how deep her pain ran. Hooked on drugs, lost in the same streets that took so much from her. And then Bobby was sent away again, this time for 10 years. Carol, left to raise Jimmy alone, simply couldn't. She was too far gone, and with no real guidance at home, Jimmy did what so many young kids in South Central did. He turned to the streets. The Deuce Gang became his family, and just like that, another cycle began. Carol wasn't a villain. She was a victim of the same environment that consumed so many. Her story was tragic, but it was real. Larita Shelby was just 26 when she played Carol, and though South Central is her most memorable role, she has had a steady career. She's appeared in films like Black Sheep, 1996, and No Way Back, 1995, among others. Today, at 59, she's still active in entertainment, but for many, she'll always be remembered as Carol, the woman who tried to hold on but couldn't escape the weight of the streets. Genie Lamp, played by Kevin Best, was the kind of villain who loved to flex his power. He wasn't just some quiet, calculating boss. He was loud, obnoxious, and made sure everyone knew exactly who was in charge. A Kansas City pimp, club owner, and drug kingpin, he controlled South Central's underworld with money, muscle, and sheer intimidation. He thrived on making people fear him, waving guns in faces and barking orders to remind everyone he was the top dog. Genie Lamp wasn't about sharing territory. He wanted it all. The Deuce Gang was in his way, and Bobby was his biggest problem. When Bobby got out of prison, Genie made sure life wasn't easy for him. He humiliated him, threatened him, and made it clear that Bobby would never truly be free. But even a man like Genie Lamp could be touched. The war between him and the Deuce Gang ended with Bobby taking his first life, a moment that changed him forever. Bobby wasn't a killer by nature, but in the streets, survival comes first. Kevin Best brought a raw, menacing energy to the role, making Genie Lamp a character you loved to hate. Before South Central, 1992, he had roles in Teen Witch, 1989, and the crime drama Hunter. Despite his undeniable screen presence, his Hollywood career never took off in a big way. Now 66, he stays out of the limelight, but to those who remember South Central, he'll always be the ruthless, loudmouth kingpin who pushed Bobby to his breaking point. Ray Ray, played by Byron Minns, was the kind of guy who had power in the streets. In South Central, 1992, he wasn't just another gang member, he was the shot caller, the one pulling the strings. He had Bobby Johnson's loyalty, and when Bobby went down, Ray Ray kept the Hoover Deuce gang running like a well-oiled machine. But the problem with power? It makes you think you own everything, including people. By the time Bobby gets out of prison, Ray Ray isn't just running the streets, he's got his sights set on the next generation. And that includes Jimmy, Bobby's son. He sees Jimmy as another recruit, but Bobby, he's done with that life. When he stands up to Ray Ray, it's more than just a confrontation, it's a turning point. Because for the first time, someone tells Ray Ray, no. Byron Minns played Ray Ray with a chilling calmness, never loud, never over the top, just pure control. He was 30 when he brought Ray Ray to life, and now, at 62, he's still in the game. Beyond South Central, Minns has had a steady career, but his biggest mark came with Black Dynamite, 2009, where he co-starred and co-wrote the film. He's kept busy behind the scenes, writing and producing, proving that he's got just as much talent off-screen as he does on it. Still, for those who grew up on South Central, he'll always be Ray Ray, the man who almost had Jimmy, but underestimated the strength of a father who refused to lose his son. Bear, played by Lexi Bigham in South Central, 1992, wasn't just a member of the Hoover Deuce gang. He was its muscle, its enforcer, the kind of man who didn't ask questions, just handled business. As Ray Ray's right hand, he was always close behind, watching, listening, waiting for the nod that told him it was time to act. He didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. If you were in the way, you got dealt with. But Bear wasn't just a follower. He believed in the life. The gang was his family, and in his eyes, loyalty wasn't about friendship. It was about power, about never showing weakness. So when Bobby went to prison and started preaching a different way, Bear saw it as betrayal. Bobby wasn't just turning his back on the gang, he was questioning the very foundation they built their lives on. And in their world, that couldn't be forgiven. When Bobby's own son Jimmy started getting pulled into the streets, Bear saw him as just another soldier in the making. A kid without direction, easy to mold. But Bobby had other plans, and when he tried to pull Jimmy out, that put him directly in Bear's path. It was a clash between two men who once stood side by side, one trying to break the cycle, the other reinforcing it. Lexi Bigham had a knack for playing characters like Bear. Tough, uncompromising, men who lived and died by the code. He made his mark in films like Boys and the Hood, 1991, and Seven, 1995, capturing the rawness of street life with authenticity. But in South Central, Bear remains a symbol of the unwavering loyalty to the streets, a man who lived by the code and never questioned it. Ken Dog, played by Baldwin Sykes in South Central, 1992, was all about the street life, wrapped up in the hustle and the code of the Hoover Deuce gang. A car enthusiast with big dreams of getting rich, Ken Dog loved the thrill of the game, and like many in the gang, he didn't think twice about bending the rules to make things happen. When Bobby, fresh out of prison and trying to stay under the radar after killing Genie Lamp, was laying low, Ken Dog wasn't about to let him hide forever. He convinced Bobby that the heat had died down and that he could start living his life again, free from the watchful eyes of the law. Loco, ever the follower, was right there alongside them, eager to get back to his old ways. But their plans went south when they were caught by a policewoman masquerading as a hooker. Ken Dog, Loco, and Bobby, three of them, walked right into the trap, their plan unraveling in an instant. Baldwin Sykes was already familiar to audiences, having played Monster in Boys and the Hood, 1991, and brought a similar energy to his role as Ken Dog. At the time, Sykes was 29, but his ability to portray street-smart, hard-edged characters made him a staple in the industry. Over the years, he continued acting, with roles in Not Easily Broken, 2009, and more recently, Famous, 2023. Now 61, Baldwin Sykes has maintained a steady career, but Ken Dog will always be remembered as a man caught up in the cycle of street life, always hustling, but ultimately making one mistake that led to his downfall. Loco, played by Vincent Craig Dupree, was a tragic figure in South Central, 1992. A man who thought gang life was his only way to belong, but ended up abandoned when he needed help the most. He wasn't the toughest or the smartest, but he was loyal, to a fault. He ran with Hoover Deuce, following Ray Ray's orders, thinking that would protect him. But Ray Ray? He didn't care about Loco. Nobody really did. Loco's biggest demon wasn't just the gang, it was addiction. He was a cigarette fiend, always itching for his next smoke. He wasn't moving through life with power, he was moving with desperation. Every decision he made was controlled by that need. On the outside, he could chase his fix. But when he landed in prison, it all caught up to him. Withdrawals hit him like a truck. He wasn't tough in there. He was shaking, tweaking, falling apart. You couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He had no power, no control, just the overwhelming weight of addiction breaking him down. Vincent Craig Dupree was 37 when he brought Loco to life, and now at 69, he's still remembered for that raw, unsettling performance. Horror fans might recognize him from Friday the 13th films in the 80s, but for many, he'll always be Loco, the lost soul who rode for the gang, but got left behind. His story wasn't just about gang loyalty. It was about how addiction makes you a prisoner long before you ever see a cell. Ali, played by 41-year-old Carl Lumbly in South Central, was the kind of man who had nothing left but wisdom. By the time Bobby met him in prison, Ali had already lived out his worst nightmare. He had spent years grinding, working hard, and doing what he thought was right, but he didn't give his son the time he needed. And in the end, the streets took him. The pain of losing his boy turned into rage, and that rage led him to a decision that changed everything. He hunted down the men responsible and took their lives. In that moment, it didn't matter what was right or wrong. All he wanted was payback. But revenge cost him his freedom. Now serving life, Ali had plenty of time to think. He understood the trap he had fallen into, and when he met Bobby, he saw another man on the edge of that same cliff. Bobby still had a son. Bobby still had a way out. And Ali wasn't about to let him throw it all away. He taught Bobby discipline, self-control, and the strength to walk away from the same cycle that had ruined his own life. Ali couldn't change his own past, but maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else from making the same mistake. Carl Lumbly, now 73, has had an incredible career, from Mantis to Alias. But in South Central, he wasn't just acting. He was delivering a lesson, a hard truth. And for those who remember, Ali will always be the man who lost it all, but found a way to give someone else a second chance. Jimmy, or J-Rock, portrayed by 14-year-old Christian Marquis Coleman in South Central 1992, was a tragic reflection of how the streets can claim a young soul before they even get a chance to grow. Born to an addict mother and a father in prison, Jimmy never had the stability he needed. His father's incarceration kept him from ever knowing his son, and when his dad returned to prison, there was no one left to guide him. Turning to the Hoover Deuce gang for a sense of belonging, Jimmy started by stealing car stereos. In his world, survival meant doing whatever it took, and without guidance, he became just another product of his environment. One night, after stealing Old Man Willie's radio, Jimmy tried to escape, but was shot in the back, a stark reminder of how brutal his world had become. In the end, his father returned, trying to pull him away from the streets, but it was almost too late. Christian Coleman's performance as J-Rock was raw and real, capturing the pain of a boy lost in a system that never gave him a chance. Now 47, Coleman's own life mirrors his character's struggles. After a promising start, he's now serving a 20-year sentence for a crime committed in 2016. It's hard not to feel for him, knowing the potential he had and the tragic path his life has taken. Like J-Rock, he was a young man caught in a cycle that was difficult to escape. Nurse Shelly, played by Starletta Dupois, was one of the few bright spots in South Central, 1992. Even in a world filled with gangs, violence, and struggle, she represented hope, kindness, and second chances. As a dedicated nurse, she wasn't just there to do her job, she truly cared. When young Jimmy was wheeled into the hospital after being shot, his life hanging by a thread, Nurse Shelly didn't just treat him like another patient. She saw a child, a lost boy caught in a cycle of pain, an addict mother at home, and a father locked away. For Nurse Shelly, Jimmy became more than just a patient. He became a mission. She nursed him back to health with genuine compassion, making sure he felt safe and cared for in a way he hadn't before. But she knew healing his body wasn't enough. His life needed saving too. She wanted Jimmy to see that there was a way out, that he didn't have to follow the path laid out for him by the streets. Even after he was discharged, she helped connect him with people who could guide him toward a better future. Starletta DuPois brought warmth and depth to the role, just as she has throughout her decades-long career. With more than 90 film and television credits, she's been a constant presence in Hollywood, from The Color Purple, 1985, to The Wire. Now 83, she continues to thrive in the industry, proving that true talent stands the test of time. Willie Manchester, played by Ivory Ocean, was a hard-working man who just wanted to enjoy his later years in peace. One night, as he was winding up to have an intimate moment with his wife, the blaring sound of his car alarm shattered the mood. Annoyed and alarmed, he rushed to the window and spotted a figure breaking into his car. His heart pounded. His home, his property, his sense of security were all under threat. Without hesitation, he grabbed his rifle and stormed outside. The thief was already on the run, stereo in hand. Willie didn't stop to think. He raised his gun, took aim, and fired. Jimmy, Bobby's son, hit the pavement, shot from behind. He wasn't a grown man, wasn't armed, wasn't even a real threat. He was just a lost kid caught up in the streets, trying to find his way in a world that had already given up on him. But fate had other plans. Jimmy lived. The bullet didn't take his life, but it changed its course forever. It was a brutal wake-up call, a harsh reminder that the streets don't love anybody. As for Willie, was he just protecting what was his? Or did he go too far? Ivory Ocean brought depth to the role, making Willie feel like a man you might know. Outside of South Central, he starred in The Mask, 1994, and Soap Dish, 1991. He passed away in 2011 at 65, but his work in film remains unforgettable. Willie's wife, played by Vicalyn Reynolds, was right there when everything happened. She had been winding down for the night, expecting nothing more than a peaceful evening. But then the car alarm blared, shattering the quiet. Before she could fully process it, Willie was already grabbing his rifle. She barely had time to react before she followed him outside, just in time to see him take aim. And then, bang! Her breath caught in her throat as she watched Jimmy collapse. Her hands flew to her face, eyes wide in shock. She knew the boy had been stealing, but this? Did Willie really have to shoot him? As Jimmy lay groaning on the ground, she felt her body go cold. Then the police came, flashing lights cutting through the darkness, and reality truly set in. She stood frozen as they questioned her husband. She wanted to scream, to plead, to explain. But what was there to say? Willie had fired the shot. Now, he had to face the consequences. Vicalyn Reynolds brought quiet intensity to the role. Many remember her as Smokey's no-nonsense mom in Friday, 1995, and before that, she starred in the 1990 sitcom Sugar and Spice. Now 69, Reynolds remains a respected name in black cinema, leaving behind unforgettable performances that still resonate today. Bastil, played by Reginald Dorsey in South Central, 1992, was the man who called the shots for the Hoover Deuce gang behind bars. He wasn't just another inmate, he was a strategist, a leader, and a man who knew the rules of survival in a world where weakness got you killed. When Buddha, the ruthless leader of the Aryan nation, zeroed in on Loco over a cigarette debt, Bastil didn't flinch. To him, Loco was dead weight, a junkie with no discipline, no strength, and no real use to the gang. Bastil had no time for weakness, and he wasn't about to risk the gang's power to save a man who had already lost himself. But Bobby? Bobby still believed in loyalty. He stepped in to defend Loco, and Bastil didn't like it. He saw it as a waste of energy, a foolish move in a place where showing compassion could be taken as weakness. He made it clear Bobby was on his own with this one. Bastil didn't interfere, but he also didn't approve. To him, leadership was about making the hard calls, and sometimes that meant letting the weak fall. Reginald Dorsey, an award-winning actor and filmmaker, brought a raw intensity to the role. Born and raised in Dallas, Texas, he later moved to San Jose, California, where he excelled in both academics and athletics before stepping into Hollywood. Now a seasoned industry veteran, Dorsey has starred in films like Return to Lonesome Dove, 1993, and Kings of the Evening, 2010, proving time and again that his presence on screen commands attention. Buddha, played by 40-year-old Tim DeZarn in South Central, was the kind of man who thrived on fear. As the leader of the Aryan Nation in prison, he ran his people with an iron grip, making sure nobody questioned his authority. He wasn't just about hate, he was about control. And in a place where weakness could get you killed, he loved finding easy targets. Loco, a struggling addict with no backbone, was one of them. Buddha tormented him relentlessly, pushing him to his breaking point. But Bobby wasn't having it. Loyalty was everything to him. Loco might not have been the strongest, but he was still part of the Hoover Deuce crew, and Bobby wasn't about to let him get eaten alive. That put him directly in Buddha's crosshairs. The racial lines in prison were already thick, and this made them even thicker. Their rivalry became another layer in Bobby's already dangerous sentence. Buddha wasn't just another prison tough guy. He was calculated. He knew how to get inside people's heads, how to test them, and how to push them toward destruction. And Bobby had to decide. Let it slide and watch someone crumble, or step in and make himself a target. Tim DeZarn, now 72, has built a career playing tough, menacing characters in films like Fight Club, 1999, and Rage and Honor, 1992. Off-screen, his life has had its own challenges. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife and daughter, but in 2007, he suffered a devastating loss when his 18-year-old son, Travis, was killed in an auto accident. Sal Landy, who played the unnamed detective in South Central, 1992, wasn't the kind of cop who relied on shouting or tough guy tactics. Instead, he was the type who understood that pressure came in different forms. He didn't need to raise his voice to break someone down. With a steady, no-nonsense demeanor, he was calm, precise, and calculated, using the law to get into your head and make you realize you couldn't escape. When he questioned Bobby about Genie Lamp's death, you could tell he had already put the pieces together. The evidence was there. Bobby's fingerprints on the gun. But it wasn't just about the facts for Landy. He knew that Bobby was still a father, a man with something to lose. He used that angle, telling him how his son would grow up without him, pulling on Bobby's heartstrings. Sal wasn't about revenge or cruelty. He was about making Bobby face the consequences of his choices, showing him that it wasn't just his life that was on the line. It was everything. At 41, Sal Landy's measured performance was a contrast to the chaos of the street life around him. His role in South Central was one of the film's standout moments. Though he would go on to appear in projects like Independence Day, 2016, and Blonde, 2022, this role remains a memorable example of how subtlety and control can leave a lasting impact. Now 73, Landy's career continues, but for many, he'll always be the detective who put Bobby's future on the line. And that's the power of South Central, a story that still hits just as hard today as it did back then. A reminder that cycles can be broken, that redemption is real, and that sometimes the toughest thing a man can do is change. What did South Central mean to you? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And if you love revisiting classics like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that shaped us. Until next time, keep the lessons, keep the memories, and most of all, keep the conversation going.